Assalamu alaikum. Have you ever seen a yellow soil or a green soil or a red soil? Well, what does it come to your mind when you look at these different colors? And can you guess the chemical content of the soil by looking at the color? What does it come to your mind when you touch the soil? Can you guess the texture of the soil by touching it? Today's lecture, we're going to have a brief on the physical properties of the soil. Then we're going to talk about the importance of the physical properties. And finally, we're going to start by talking about the soil color and how can we know more by just looking at the color of the soil. Without further ado, let's begin.
If you look at the soil and inspect it, you would find that it basically consists of three different things. It consists of mineral particles, which represent 48%, and then you have 2% organic matter, and the last part is basically the pore spaces. Now, the pore spaces can be either entirely filled with air, or entirely filled with water, or filled with air and water. So in a well aerated condition, you would find 25% air and 25% water. In a saturated conditions, all the pore spaces are filled with water. And in a very dry condition, mostly that the pore spaces are filled with air. Now, how all of these components or these three parts affects the physical properties, and why it is really important to be explored in a soil science. Let's go and dive more into the soil and discover it. The physical properties of the soil indicates the appearance and the feel of the soil. Therefore, it consists of the color, for example, or the texture, which describe how it feels, or the structure, which is basically the shape of the soil, how heavy or how dense is the soil, which describe the density and porosity, how hard is the soil, which describe the strength, or how wet the soil, which describe the water content, or how hot the soil, which describe the temperature. These physical properties of the soil are fundamental and very important for the sustainability. For example, the physical properties indicates the sustainability of the soil for agriculture. The physical properties determine the sustainability of the wildlife and plant. The physical properties would tell us whether this soil is suitable for building or not. And it would also tell us whether this soil can be easily eroded or not. The physical properties control the movement and the storage of the water. And not only that, but also it can control the movement and the storage of nutrient as well. And the physical properties can further affect the chemical and biological properties of the soil. And that's why we have to study. One of the most important physical properties of the soil is the color. Now, when you look at different soils having different colors, it can tell you a lot more stories deeper than what you only can see, because the color can tell you about the chemical content of that soil. The color also can describe for you the condition, whether that soil is a well aerated or not well aerated, whether that soil having a wet condition or a dry condition. Basically, the color is like the paint of the wall. So the color can describe for us the type of the parent material. The color can tell us about the amount of organic matter. And a red color, for example, in the soil can tell you that you might have a lot of iron oxide on it. The color also can describe the aeration of the soil. So if you have a darker color, then it can indicate for you that your soil is wet. And if the color developed to be more to a green side, then it can tell you that your soil is wet for a long time. Or if the color is light, then it can tell you that your soil is dry. It is true that from the soil color we can tell a lot of stories. So if you just look at the first profile, you would see that this profile is dark in color, it's basically black, and you would find that it's an organic soil. The second profile is a young soil profile in the floodplain, which receive frequent sediments. The third profile is red in color, and this profile is basically in a well-drained soil, and because of this, the iron oxide on it, the iron was oxidized and turned into this red color. So it tells us about the aeration and the degree of weather. But how can we identify and classify the color of the soil? Well, basically, we would use something called Mansell color chart, which is basically like a book. Now, in the Mansell color chart, there are three basic important components. Hue, which basically describe the different colors, the color of the rainbow. The value, which describe the blackness or the whiteness. So if you have a value closer to 0, it means black. And finally, the chroma, which describe the purity of the color. Now remember, a purity of the color is basically the soil becomes naked, or when you remove the paint of the soil, when you remove all of these materials, it goes back to its native color, which is almost pure and gray. To understand these three components, let's look inside one of the pages of the Mansell color chart. Now, if you look at this example, you would find that at the top right corner you have the hue. Now, the hue is written as 10YR. So Y indicates yellow and R indicates red. And each page of the Mansell color chart have a unique hue value. Looking at the left side of this page, you would find the value. Now, as you can see that if you go down, the value becomes less and the color becomes darker and darker. And if you go up, the value increases and the color becomes brighter or whiter. Chroma is the third component. And chroma, as we said, describes the purity of the soil. So if you move to the right side, or if the chroma value increases, then the soil becomes less pure compared to if you move to a smaller chroma value, the soil becomes more pure. It will return to its original color without the paint. Now we know more about the soil color and what does it mean, but what are the three factors that can influence the soil color? Well, the three factors as follow. The organic matter content. When you have more organic matter content, the color of the soil will become darker and darker. The second condition is, or the second factor is the water. So when you have more of water, the soil becomes darker and the rate of decomposition of organic matter and oxidation will be reduced. The third factor is the oxidation state of iron and manganese, because these two minerals, when they change in the oxidation status, they reflect a different color in the soil. And to understand this more, let's go to the next slide. So, how can the soil color indicate the change of the chemical status of iron, for example? When the soil has a lot of iron on it, and the soil becomes well aerated, then iron will be oxidized, and when it is oxidized, it will reflect a red-brown color. Now, if this soil becomes saturated, then it will become in under anaerobic condition, and at this stage iron will be reduced, and due to this reduction, the color will change from red brown to gray bluish or gray green color. So we can see now that the color can even tell us about the change of the chemical status of some of the minerals like iron. And so that's all for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you explored more new things in the soil. So see you and take care. Bye.